Daf Yomi Warriors at the Mishnah. We learned there's a machlekes for Belezer and Yeshua regarding sprinkling the blood without anything to offer, without any meat or fat. Rabbi Eliezer holds that dam afal pi she'ein basar, and Rabbi Yeshua holds no, that you need to have basar in order to sprinkle the blood. We said that there's a difference between a korban Pesach and other sacrifices, because the korban Pesach, the main thing is the eating of the people, not the mizbeach. The mizbeach is important, but the main korban is the people eating. Our Mishnah begins nitma basar b'chelav kayim. The basar became tamei. You still have the chelav though. Chelav is the fat that goes on the altar. So, ein zerikas adam, you can't sprinkle the blood. Now, according to Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, by a regular sacrifice, even if everything is tamei, you would still sprinkle the blood. Here, you have half of it that's tahar. Should be good, but no, it's not good, because the korban Pesach, the ikar Pesach is for achila. So, in other words, according to both opinions, ein zerikas adam here, because you don't have any food to eat. There's no meat. Nitma ha'chelav ha'basar kayim. Let's say the other way. The chelav became tamei. What gets offered on the altar is tamei, but the flesh is still there. The meat, the beef. Zerikas adam. Then you can sprinkle the blood of the korban pesach. Mukdashin einakein. By other korbanos, it's not so. If the basar becomes tamei, but the chelav is still there, then zerikas adam. You can sprinkle the blood. And the chiddush over here is even according to Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua holds that you need to have the flesh there in order to sprinkle the blood. And you do. You have not the flesh, but you have the fat, and that should be enough by other korbanos, but not by a korban Pesach. Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav. Rav Gidel says in the name of Rav. It's pretty frequent for Rav Gidel to say he's a student of Rav. It's pretty common. Usually you have Rav Yehuda, Rav Chisda, not Rav Chisda. You have Rav Yehuda, Rav Huna, and you have we have Rav Gidel, Rav Kanas. Im Zarak Kurza. If the blood was sprinkled, even by nitma habasar, even if there's no flesh, the sacrifice still worked. We had a statement similar to this before from Rabbi Yeshua, the Mizara Kurza. That's by nitma basar. Rabbi Yeshua says, La Yizrik, but Maida is Maida that if you do sprinkle the blood, it works. In other words, there's a difference between Lachatchila and B'diavad. B'diavad, it's worked. The Gemara asks the obvious question. In second, it says, V'abin nachila. But you need to eat the sacrifice. You didn't eat from the korban. Yeah, you sprinkled the blood, so it worked. But what about the people eating? They have to eat from the korban Pesach. Gemara says, according to Rav, achila laimakva, eating the korban Pesach doesn't affect the validity. The Gemara says, 1 second. It says each man according to what he can eat. That is important. It says that's la mitzvah. But it doesn't affect the validity of the sacrifice if they don't eat. But Tanya b'michsas, it says according to the amount of people. That means that the korban Pesach is only slaughtered to those people that registered. Maybe if you shechted it for people that are not registered, well, you violated a positive command, but the sacrifice is still kosher. Maybe. According to the amount of people that eat, that's how it should be shechted. The pasuk repeats it to tell me that the registering of this creates the validity of the sacrifice, which means so far that I need to have people registered on the sacrifice. That's the big question. And now we do a comparison between people that can eat and also people that are registered, which means like this, that if someone is not able to eat, for example, he's a chayla, he's sick, or he's a zakin, he's old, he can't eat from the Korban Pesach. So, and the sacrifice was slaughtered just for him or for them, so then the sacrifice isn't valid, which means that the potential to eat from the sacrifice, it creates the validity of the sacrifice, which means that the eating of the sacrifice is important. And if they can't eat, then it won't be valid. Rav goes like a different Tana. According to these brises, we have a problem. But Rav has his own source. He goes like Reb Nassan. And Reb Nassan says, Reb Nassan was the friend of Reb Meir. Some say that he's also Reb Yonasan. He's also known as Reb Nassan Abavli. Rav goes like Reb Nassan Damar Achilas Pesachim Leima'akva. Eating the Korban Pesach doesn't affect the validity of the sacrifice. Hey, Reb Nassan, which Reb Nassan? Where do you get this from? Now, that Reb Nassan has a lot of statements all over the place. Which one is the one that you're seeing the seeds of this opinion that you don't actually need to eat the Korban Pesach? Ilay Mahar Reb Nassan. Maybe it's the following Reb Nassan. The Tanya was taught in a brayso Reb Nassan. How do you know that the whole Jewish people can fulfill their obligation with one Korban Pesach? Which reminds you of the Sukkah Mishnah. Does mean how do you know that all the Jewish people can be in one Sukkah? So here we have by the Korban Pesach. Talmud Laimar, as the pasuk says, "V'shachtu," I should call Kala Das Yisrael Ben Arbaim, that the entire congregation slaughters it in the afternoon. V'chikol akol sheichten. Does everyone actually shech? Balayin sheichet alei echad. I forget if this is what Rashi says. I remember Rashi asked the question on Chumash. I forget if he gives this answer. Teaches us that everyone can use one Korban Pesach. How does everyone use one Korban Pesach? There's not enough food in the Korban. It must be that achilas lemakva. They don't actually have to eat from it. The sacrifice would still be valid. They have a mitzvah to eat from the Korban Pesach. There's no question about that. But it's still considered that they brought a Korban Pesach. Dilma, Shani Hassam, maybe over there it's different. Over there it doesn't say that you can actually have one sacrifice for all the people. It doesn't say that. It says that they're roi, that they're fit, potentially fit. Dilma, Shani Hassam, the Imam Shechihani, Chazalahani. The Imam Shechihani, Chazalahani. Maybe what it means is theoretically, it could be for anyone there, but it can't be for all of them. It could be for all of them, but not for all of them together. Which means that everyone could register in this Korban Pesach. The only thing is that if some back out, others can then fill those spots. So theoretically, there is room for everyone here, but just not all at the same time. Right? It's like saying everyone in North Miami Beach can use the mikveh. They can, they're just not at the same time. So that's what we're saying over here. That all the Jewish people could have registered for this Korban Pesach. So this doesn't prove to me anything about Achila. This is just theoretically this, but they could have done that. Ella Reb Nassan, it must be the next Reb Nassan, the other one. The Tanya, not a different person, a different statement. It's taught in the Brisa. Nimno alav chabura achas. If one group registered for the Korban Pesach, v'chazru v'nimno alav chabura acheres. Now the word here v'chazru doesn't mean that they retracted. That's what I was learning this morning, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. V'chazru means and then. And then another group registered for the same Korban Pesach. So now it's doubled up. There's too many people. Rishayim Sheishlam Kazayas, the first ones that when they registered, if you would divide up the Korban Pesach for those people that registered, there would be a Kazayas for each one. So then Eichlin Uptur Melasas Pesach Sheni. they can eat from the Korban Pesach, and they don't need to make a Pesach Sheni. They have their Korban Pesach now. But the second group that just registered, Shein Lem Kazayas, there's not enough food for them. They registered too late. There's nothing left. Ein Eichlin. V'chayav last is Pesach Sheni. You hear this? If there's too many people, they have to make a new. They have to make a Pesach Sheni. They registered too many. There's no Kazayas for them. Reb Nassan Aimer. Reb Nassan says Eilu ve'Eilu P'tur Melasses Pesach Sheni Shekvar Nizar Kadam. Says that they're exempt from the Pesach Sheni because the blood was sprinkled for them. You see, according to Reb Nassan, Achilos Lai Makva. The Gemara says, Akati Dilma Shani Hasan Di Mamshcha Hani Chazilahu. Maybe over there, because it was theoretically able for them to eat, if someone would retract, there would be food for them. So that's why it's acceptable. You see, what we're doing here is we're comparing it to a case where nitma basar. Rav told us at the beginning that if the blood is sprinkled in a scenario where the Korban Pesach became tamei, but you sprinkle the blood, the flesh became tamei, you sprinkle the blood. So there's no one's going to be able to eat this. Rav said, "Oh, it's going to be kosher." Yeah, but no one's going to eat it. No one can eat it. No one even has potential to eat it. So Rav said, "Oh, it must be." We're explaining according to Rav, it must be that the achilos like ma'akva. So we say, where does he hold like? Where's that source? We say the source is Reb Nassan. Reb Nassan has a source of too many people on a Korban Pesach, and it's still good. He said, but maybe over there's potential for them to eat it. Over here, there's no potential. Over here, our case is much worse. We don't have a source where there's no potential to eat it, that it should be acceptable. Imkain, listen, hayal v'uruyim limashich. Ma'ishekvar nizra kadam. Rav says no. Rav would say. In the brisa that you're telling me, that where Reb Nassan says that it's kosher, even though there's not enough food for everyone to eat, we said, why is it kosher? We said, because the blood was sprinkled. So we said, maybe that's just because of the potential that they had to eat it, and that's why it's kosher. Because maybe someone would retract, and then there would be food for this one, this one retract would be food for that one. Potentially, they were able to. So the Gemara says, if that were the case, that it all has to do with the potential, so then why did the brisa say because the blood was sprinkled, that's like in quotes, that the blood was sprinkled, that's why it's kosher? It should have said because they had potential. It doesn't have to do with the sprinkling of the blood, it has to do with the potential that they had, maybe someone would retract. It should have said, because they could have retracted. Why is it emphasizing that the blood was sprinkled? That means that if the blood's sprinkled, it's good. You don't need to eat. See, Rav is a raya from the language of the Mishnah. You're right. From the halacha of the brisa. From the halacha of the brisa, you could have explained it differently. But the language of the brisa lends you to assume that it has to do with the sprinkling of the blood, and the eating is not that is not market. The Gemara now has an interesting question. What do we just do to our Mishnah, according to Rav? Our Mishnah says that if the basar became tamei, you can't sprinkle the blood. So we have two approaches here. One approach is the approach of the Rabbanan, where Korban Pesach needs to be eaten, and this is Korban Pesach is possible. You can't sprinkle the blood. You have another approach of Reb Nassan, which Rav is following, that says, oh no, you're just not supposed to lechatchila sprinkle the blood. But if you did, it's kosher. So you have two options. How do you want to learn the Mishnah? Rav chose the Reb Nassan option. My duchke de Rav the mukim masnisin lechatchila for Reb Nassan. Nukmei karabanan rafil diavad namilay. Why did Rav have to choose it that way to say, oh, the Mishnah is talking about l'chatchila. You're not supposed to, ein azerek es adam. But if you did, we'll follow Reb Nosson that says that it's kosher. You could have read the Mishnah the same way, and you could follow the Rabbanan and say that it's also that it's possible b'diavad. It says Rav must listen kashisi. Rav had a problem with the Mishnah, with the language of the Mishnah. Amai tani amai ein zerek es adam. Why does it say don't sprinkle the blood? Listen, puzzle. Say that it's puzzle. Nitma basar is puzzle. It must be it's the language is ein zerek means don't go ahead and sprinkle. That tells me that okay, maybe if you did, it's kosher. Okay, Rab Nosson what does Rab Nosson do with according to the amount of people that are going to eat? What does he do with that? The binun gaver the chazil achila. Rab Nosson says, you're right. You need people that are going to eat, that potentially could eat. The person needs to be able to eat. If you shech the korban pesach for a bunch of people that can't eat because they can only eat a little bit because of they're ill or because of their age, so then the korban pesach isn't valid. Unless you need people that could eat. The people need to be able to eat, not actually to be able to eat. It's a type of person, not the amount of food. That's Man Tana Lahad Tana Rabbanan. Who is the author of the following brisa? Shachtu la'ichlav. You shechted it for people that can eat. Bezarku damav shlei la'ichlav. You sprinkle the blood for people that can't eat. I'm translating according to the way Taisus reads this Gemara. When I first read this, I understood that it's saying Shachtu la'ichlav for the people that are going to eat it. It means you had the right people in mind. You had the wrong people in mind when you sprinkle the blood. It says, Pesach atzmei kosher, the korban Pesach is kosher, and the person fulfills his obligation. Who would hold something like that? So this, to me, had nothing to do with Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson's point was that you don't need to eat, not that you can have in mind other people. So, Taisus learns, Shlei la'ichlav means that the people there possibly were ill. They at the beginning, when you shechted it, they were fine. Or maybe it's other people. But by the shechita, you shechted it with intention for people that were fine, that were able to eat. And then when it came to the zrika, you sprinkled the blood for people that can't eat because they were ill. Maybe the same people, maybe other people, or different parts of the group, some maybe. So it says that it's kosher. It must be Reb Nosson who holds that the eating isn't that significant. It says, come on, name Reb Nosson, Rabbanan. Maybe it's Reb Nosson. The Gemara says, no, I feel Tamer Rabbanan. This could be the Rabbanan. Don't limit the brisa to Reb Nosson because we have over here a mention of Shlei la'ichlav and it's still kosher. Ein machshav seichel b'zrika. We had this before, we mentioned this before, that usually by the sacrifice, there's a bunch of activities, services, that any thoughts during those services invalidate the sacrifice if they're not correct. This is an exception. The people registered for the korban Pesach, you have them in mind by the shechita. After the shechita, it doesn't matter. It's based on the pasuk. I forget the sources, but it's based on the pasuk that you shecht it for, maybe tachaiso means to shecht. Right? I think the Gemara learns from that. According to the people that are registered, you shecht it for them. That are registered, you shecht it. That's how you. Okay. So the zrika doesn't affect the validity. Based on the sprinkling of the blood, doesn't affect the validity if you had others in mind. The non-registered or people that aren't eligible. What about the next brisa? He was healthy by the shechita, but he was ill by the zrika. Yeah, Dr. Stein has to give us the type of illness of it. Maybe he felt faint. Maybe that was it. Saw the shechita. Anyway, by the zrika, he's not able to eat. He was fine before. Cholam b'shas shchita, v'chayla b'shas zrika. The word cholam means healthy. He's healthy by the shchita, but he's ill by the zrika. Oh, so the first case was different. He was chayla by the shchita, but he was healthy by the zrika. Or he was healthy by the shchita. There were two opposite cases. Or he was healthy by the shchita and he's ill by the zrika. You have to be healthy through and through. Come on, who does this go like? Name Rab Nosson. Rab Nosson said, or at least, let's see. According to Rab Nosson, at least based on the brisa before, but I don't think anyone held that there was an issue by the zrika. It must be that although the machshava by the zrika doesn't affect the validity, but the person, as we're going to answer now, the person needs to be healthy. The status of the person needs to be that he's healthy long enough to be able to eat it. The Gemara says, I need someone that's able to eat. And over here, if he's ill, either by the shchita or by the zrika, even though the machshava by the zrika didn't affect, but it would still affect who the person is, the status of the person. That's what it seems. Okay. Another question. Who's the author of the following brisa? Shachtu betara, vachkach nitmu bailam. Well, that's an interesting question. You shechted it when everyone was eligible because they were tar. But then they became tamid. And the blood wasn't sprinkled yet. So yizarik adam betara val yechal basar betuma. You sprinkle the blood, but you don't eat it. The owners are now tamid. You sprinkle the blood, well, not anyone that's tamid, but someone that's tar sprinkles the blood, but you don't eat it. Come on, who does this go like? Amar Rebbe Lazar, adjust that. The machlekes shnuya. It's actually machlekes. Reb Nosson, this is the opinion of Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson says that you can sprinkle the blood without people that are going to eat it. Reb Yechanan Amar Afil Tema Rabbanan. Reb Yechanan says, you know what? You're right. It could have been Reb Nosson, but I don't want to limit the brisa to Reb Nosson. I have a better way of reading the brisa. It's actually the opinion of the Rabbanan. What? The Rabbanan? The Rabbanan hold that you need to have people that are going to eat it. It says, no. We'll change the story here. We thought we were talking about it in the individual. Nitmo Abailam, the owners of this sacrifice. No, we're not dealing with one sacrifice. We're dealing with the entire Abailam of all the sacrifices. And they can even do it betuma. The Gemara has a question on Rabbi Yechanan. So then why can't they eat it? According to the way Rabbi Yechanan is fixing the brisa, to say that it's going to fit according to everyone, then you lose half of the halacha. Why are they only allowed to sprinkle the blood? Why can't they eat it as well? If that's the case, if the scenario here is that it's really talking about all the Jewish people became tamei. How did they become tamei? The Nasi passed away right after the Shechita, and it was before the Zrika. And so everyone runs to the Levaya. I don't know exactly. They left someone there stirring the blood anyway, but the majority of the community becomes tamei. So the question is, why can't they eat it? So the Gemara answers a very interesting answer. They don't eat it because of a gzeira. let's say the owners would become tamei la'achar zrika. See here, the sacrifice is being offered bituma, which has a certain status, which we do sometimes. If the entire congregation is tamei, we'll bring a carbon pesach bituma, and then it has the halachas that people can still eat it even though they're tamei. But let's say the sacrifice was offered bitara, and then everyone becomes tamei. Then there's a problem. This wasn't a sacrifice that was brought bituma. So let's say the following year something similar happens, and they all become tamei not before the zrika. They all become tamei right after the zrika. The yoimru, and they'll say, last year we weren't tamei and we ate. We should also eat. We should also eat now. And they won't know that last year when the blood was sprinkled, the owners were tamei, and therefore they were allowed to eat it because the blood was sprinkled. The carbon was brought with the owners that were tamei, and for the entire congregation. And over here, the carbon was brought bitara. So hashta bailam tairma, but now they are bitara, so it's going to be a problem. So that's why they don't eat it, just because of this mix-up that could happen the following year. If they think that they can eat the carbon bituma when they become tamei after the shechita, they may think that the same thing will apply if they become tamei after the zrika. Okay. In other words, the sacrifice becomes Pesach haba b'tama as opposed to Pesach haba b'tara, which has different halachas on it. V'iba yasema. Now we jump back to what's the source of Rav. Rav said that if you sprinkle the blood on a carbon Pesach, that the flesh became tamei, the carbon Pesach was valid. We said that was the opinion of Reb Nosson. V'iba yasema, if you want, you could say Rav Damak Reb Yeshua. Rav actually follows the opinion of Reb Yeshua. The Tanya was taught in the Brisa. Reb Yeshua, Imer, Kol hazvachim shebetoira, bein shenitma basar v'chelav kayim, bein shenitma chelav v'basar kayim, zerikas adam. As long as there's one part of this animal that could be offered on the altar, it's fine. However, and you sprinkle the blood. However, nazir va'isa pesach, by the carbon of a nazir, yeah, Tosfos says not to be goyrus nazir. Okay. Someone that makes a carbon pesach, nitma chelav v'basar kayim, if the chelav becomes tamei but the flesh is still there, so then zerikas adam, because you're supposed to eat it. Nitma basar v'chelav kayim. However, if the basar became tamei and the chelav is still there, so ein zerikas adam. You don't sprinkle the blood. So far, no chiddush. That's what we learned in the Mishnah. The chiddush is v'im zarach, but if you did sprinkle the blood, the sacrifice is valid. That's the interesting part. Nitmo abaylam b'meis le'yizrik v'im zarach le'hortza. If the owners became tamei, don't sprinkle the blood. But if you did sprinkle the blood, it doesn't work. Talking about not the entire community became tamei. Talking about an individual became tamei. Now, this seems to contradict what we learned from Rabbi Yeshua before. Rabbi Yeshua said, "Nitma basar shenifsal shetzachutz lakloim, Rabbi Lezer miyizrek, Rabbi Yeshua miyizrek, Rabbi Yeshua shem zara kurtza." Rabbi Yeshua says that if you did sprinkle the blood, it's good. Over here we say zara kloihortza. I think I didn't get a chance to look in the commentaries, but I think the difference is that over there the flesh became tamei, and over here the owners became tamei. When the owners become tamei, then we say, well, you have another option. You could make a Pesach Sheni. So we're not going to make this sacrifice valid. When the owners are tar and they brought their sacrifice and the flesh becomes tamei, so if the blood was actually sprinkled, even though it wasn't supposed to be, then it's still valid. Yeah, that's you have to say over here as well. I mean, I don't have to jump back to the Gemara we learned yesterday. Over here as well, you have that If you sprinkle the blood for the basar, that's tamei, it's valid. If you sprinkle it for the owner, that's tamei, it's not valid. And the reason is because there's a Pesach Sheni for that, exactly that case, for the owner that's tamei. We're not going to make the sacrifice valid. Okay. The Makdash Neinakein. Kulu. This is not so by other sacrifices. Other sacrifices, if once there's chaylev kayam, you can sprinkle the blood, even if there's no flesh. You can just put the fat on the altar, and there's, even though it's a carbon that you're supposed to eat, but it doesn't matter. Either you or the mizbeach will make the sacrifice kosher. Masdisin Mani, who's the author of the Mishnah? Rabbi Shui. It's the opinion of Rabbi Shui. The Tanya Rabbi Shui Aimer. If there's a kazayas of basar or a kazayas of chaylev, you can sprinkle the blood. Let's say there's half and half. Half basar, half chaylev, half a kazayas of each. Then the people can't eat and the mizbeach can't eat. It's not enough for anyone. You can't sprinkle the blood. However, with the exception of uba'ila, by an oila, the basar and the chaylev all goes on the mizbeach. So the mizbeach gets a good portion over there, gets a kazayas. What about a carbon mincha? Even if it's all there, don't sprinkle the blood. The Gemara says, mincha maya vidite. What are you talking about, blood by a mincha? Right? What is this talking about? Amar of Papa, minchas nesachim salkada. Minchas nesachim. It's talking about the mincha that's brought together with the sacrifice. Now, I have a sacrifice, and I have what comes along with the sacrifice. That's the flour and the oil and the wine. Right? The flour and the oil, I guess. Salkadait chamina kiven de kaasya mikayach zevach kegufa de zevach dami kamash malan. Could have thought that since it comes along with the sacrifice, I could say, well, there's no meat left of the sacrifice. There's no fats left of the sacrifice. That all became tummy. But I still have the flour and the oil over there. Maybe I should sprinkle the blood because I do have the flour and the oil. You say no. The minchas nesachim existing is not really the sacrifice. You need part of the actual animal to exist in order to be able to sprinkle the blood. Could have thought maybe because it comes along with the sacrifice, it's considered like Gufei de Zevach. No, it's not. Chaylev minalan. Where do we know that offering up the fat is enough, or the ability to offer up the fat on the altar is enough to allow you to sprinkle the blood? If that still exists, or if there's a kazayas of that still existing, that's tahar, then you can sprinkle the blood. Where do we get that from? Am Rabbi Yechanan mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yechanan says name of Rabbi Shmuel, Umataba mishum Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. And I guess there are those that attributed it to Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. Usually mata means reached. Mati v'loi mati, right? Touching, mati is like touching and reaching. The Amar Kra, our source is that it says in the pasuk, V'hikter hachelev l'reach nichayach la'Hashem. Keter, hikter is to burn, but also means to smoke. Some Chumashim translate it. They said that you smoke the fats. I guess it means you put them on the coal, or you put them on the thing and they smoke. So Viktor Achelev L'Reach Nechayach L'Hashem, you offer up the fats as a sweet smell to God. Chelev Af B'Shem Basar. See, it says Chelev. That's a good source. That means that you can sprinkle the blood if there's chaylev there. You have a question, Naftali?
I do. With carbon Pesach, are the same innards cut out and burned as with other carbonot?
The fat is taken out.
That's all.
I believe that everything that goes on the mizbeach by a regular carbon goes as well.
Because if you read this, you would think that all that matters, all that is ever, is the zrika and burning of the chaylev.
Right.
And I'm just wondering why there's no mention of anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe that's supposed to be in. It didn't tell us like. It didn't tell us what happens to the chaz of a sheikh. What happens to usually like is this a regular carbon shlomim? Do the kayanim get a certain part of it? Is it divided up like that? The owners take everything. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. The part that goes on the mizbeach is which is the chalev, and the other parts that are surrounding the chalev and all of that.
Mhm.
That's for sure going on the altar. Yeah.
It seems like it's almost relegating everything else to secondary or subordinate status. Like all that seems to matter here is the blood and the fat,
Right. And the meat.
which does not go on the altar.
Right. But that still is very important.
Is saved.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we're going to mention some more parts of it. So, chelev af pishem basar. Chelev, even though there's no flesh, you see, it says chelev l'reich nechaya. The Gemara says ashkechan chelev. What about the yiseres hakavod shtei klayos? I don't know if this answers the question. What about the lobe of the liver? Yiseres hakavod. It probably means the diaphragm. It's attached to the liver. And shtei klayos, and the two kidneys, which also is offered on the altar. Minalan, how do you know that that's good enough? That would be considered a kazayas of that would be enough. If that's going to go up, that you can sprinkle the blood. Hey, Chamrin and Dezarkina, and where do we say that you sprinkle the blood? Midiktani b'mincha apisha kula kayemes. By a carbon mincha, even though it's all there, la yisrik, you don't sprinkle the blood. We explained that was talking about the mincha that came along with the sacrifice. So mincha hu delay. That's only a mincha. That's not. But it would be fine if it's not the mincha, if it's part of the animal. So okay, we have the source, the Mishnah, the Brisa, that tells us which parts of the animal will allow you to be able to sprinkle the blood. It says the chalev, but not a mincha. What does that mean? That yiseres hakavod would be acceptable. The Gemara says minalan, but you told me a Mishnah. But where's the Torah source? It says Rabbi Yochanan didei Rabbi Yochanan himself. He answers this. Rabbi Yochanan was saying this over in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, or some say in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. Rabbi Yochanan himself answers this question. He says Amar Kra l'reach nichayach, sweet smell. Kol shatamay l'reach nichayach. Anything that you bring as a reach nichayach is good enough. That's our source. It has to say both. Chelev and reach nichayach. Because of Rachman chelev, if we would just say the fats, have a mina chelev in yiseres hakavod shtei klayos. I would say the fats, yes, but the diaphragm and the two kidneys, not. Because of Rachman reach nichayach, it says reach nichayach, but that's also part of the sacrifice, enough that I can sprinkle the blood just for those. Because of Rachman reach nichayach, would only say the reach nichayach. I could have thought even the carbon mincha, because Rahman chalev. It says chalev that no, it has to be the fat, which ultimately ends up meaning the rest of the animal as well, but it excludes the carbon mincha. Okay, let's start the Mishnah. Moshe, if you have to leave, I hope to get up to Itmar, which is 5 lines from the bottom. Nitma kahal ayrubai, if the congregation became tamei, or majority of the congregation, or just the kainim became tamei, v'akal tairim, and everyone else is tar, yasa b'tama, then you could bring the carbon pesach b'tama. So we're telling us, we're learning this is a major halacha that when the carbon pesach could be brought, even though everyone's tamei. Even though until when would that be? So it's either the everyone is tamei, majority is tamei, or just the kainim are tamei. We didn't say roiva kainim. That's interesting. Then you yasa b'tama. You do it b'tumah. Nitma miyatakal. Let's say just a minority became tummy. Hatayr ma'isam esarishan. Then those that are tar will do, which is the majority, will do the carbon on the first on Nisan. But tameim, and those that are tamei, Oisin Sheni will do it in Iyar. We'll do it the Pesach Sheni. Taner Rabbanon. Start in a brisa. Sometimes the brisa adds in points the Mishnah didn't tell us. So it's Harisha Yisrael Tameim v'Kayanim u'Klisharis Tahirim. The Jewish people are tamei, but the Kayanim and the Klisharis are tar. Oisha Yisrael Tahirim v'Kayanim u'Klisharis Tameim. Klisharis are the vessels in the temple. Let's say the Jewish people are tar, but the Kayanim and the vessels are tamei. Vafilu Yisrael v'Kayanim Tahirim. Listen to this. The Jewish people and the Kayanim are all tar. The Klisharis Tameim, but the vessels are tamei. This we never mentioned before. At least I don't remember this. Yasu b'tumah. The sacrifice is brought b'tumah. Special halachas here. Just because the vessels are tamei. She'in carbon tzibur chalak. You don't divide up a carbon tzibur. Which means whether it's the Kayanim or the Yisrael or the Klisharis, it's brought all as one. That's how it is. The carbon tzibur. It goes across the board. Everyone would be allowed to do this b'tumah. Amar of Chizda says, hold it, 1 second. Don't get carried away with this. Loishanu ela shenitma sakin b'tumah mes. What type of tumah? It would have to be a tumah that the knife became tamei because the knife touched the corpse. Possibly was the instrument used in causing the death. But whatever the case is, we learned from the pasuk, cherev b'chalal cherev, and the Gemara tells us cherev harei kachalal, that the knife takes the sword, or the knife takes the status of the corpse itself. The corpse is a avi avaisa tama, is it like a grandfather of tama. The knife is as well, which means that it can make a person tama. So, no, nitma sakin b'tamei mes. Even if the sakin was a tamei mes, not even a mes. Even if the sakin is an abatama, it can still make the person tamei, because a person can become a risha. A person can become tamei from an ab. Okay. The Rachman Amar b'cherev b'chalal cherev harei kachalal b'kamatami legabra. And it can make the person tamei. Okay. The mikara kivasabed b'tamasaguf the karis kamasabed. Originally, if there wouldn't be any permissibility here, then when a person is tamei and he brings a sacrifice, he enters into the temple or he eats something that's holy. So there's a prohibition of karis that incurs the karis punishment. That would be very strict. Okay, so here it's going to be permissible if everyone is, but we're talking about the sakin has to have a certain status of tumah that it would make everyone tamei, to the extent that it would be karis. But if the knife only became tamei because it touched the creeping creature, so then it becomes the basar of the metamala. It can only make the flesh impure. Legavra lay metamala, but it can't make a person impure. So then, tahirin avid, tmeim lay avid. Then the people that are pure can bring the carbon pesach, but people that are tamei can't bring the carbon pesach. In other words, the sakin over here is not tamei enough to change the status of the carbon pesach. Mutav yechal b'tumas basar belav. But it's all tamei. I only have this one knife, or maybe all the knives. They're all tamei. So how am I going to do this? Just, well, it's better that the flesh be tamei. And don't let the people that are tamei eat from it, because that would be kares. Then there's a difference between tamei flesh, tamei karban, and people that are tamei. If the people are tamei, then it's karas. If the flesh is tamei, then it's just the lav. So we're saying that if the flesh is tamei, but the people aren't tamei, okay, so we'll eat the carbon pesach, betumas basar, it's only allowed. Alma, whatever the case is, we're seeing that tumah is only overridden. It's not actually permissible because we see that we're being strict over here. We're not just saying, oh, there's tumah, okay, everyone can eat it with tumah. The tumah is overridden, as we try to do it in the most minimal way of tumah possible. Rava says, no. Even if the sakin is only tamei with the tumas sheretz, people that are tamei could still do the carbon. My timer, the ksiv abasar shiga b'chol tamei la yechal beisi sarit v'abasar kol tar yechal basar. I have two parts to one pasuk. The beginning is flesh that comes in contact with something that's tamei should not be eaten; it should be burned. Flesh, anyone that's pure could eat the flesh. One is talking about the flesh being tamei, one's talking about the people being tahar in the year. If I don't apply the first part of the verse that says that flesh that's tamei should not be eaten, which I'm not going to do in this case, then I also don't apply the second part that says that the person needs to be tahar. If I do apply the first part of the verse, that the flesh that's tamei cannot be eaten, then I'll apply the second part of the verse as well, that you need to be tar. Basically, there's a machlekes here, Rava and Rav Chisda. Rava is the son of Rav Chisda. If the flesh is tamei, but not the people, not all the people, so then can tamei people actually eat this flesh? According to Rava, yes. It says it becomes an exemption. And it's considered a Pesach above B'tumah. And according to Rav Chisda, no, it's not a Pesach above B'tumah. The flesh is tamei. And that's just a minor issue. So okay, they'll have to eat the carbon Pesach even though the flesh is tamei, but it's not a Pesach above B'tumah. No, so you have to diminish as much tumah as possible down to the lowest the lowest level, which is just the flesh being tamei, not the people that are tamei eating it. Let's leave it.